you struggle to come up with original ideas, or you have lots of ideas, but once you start to render, you get lost and maybe give up? Well, that used to be me. But I found help along the way of my pen and ink journey. Studying the works of masters to me is like having a mentor. Regardless of your level, you'll pick up a few, if not many, ideas and methods to render your sketches as a result of studying the masters. You can try the exercises in this video and right away learn from the art style of today's master, Sergio Toppi. Specifically, we'll practice rendering his interesting textures and study his approach to how to render compositions. When you're looking at a masterwork, the first step of a study is to identify what jumps out and seek to understand why it's done that way. Browsing through Toppi's ink pieces, I'm immediately struck by three things. His textures serve as a design element. Even though he uses a wide variety of effects within his composition, the textures are the focal point. The design of his textures perform in harmony. The textures don't compete with one another because of his effective use of contrast. To achieve that well-balanced contrast, you'll notice he uses two techniques: division of space and silhouetting. By judiciously assembling those three things, texture, contrast, and space, he achieves that eye-catching composition. Now, if you're keen to learn more about the steps for how to do a master study, watch this video. Let's start with textures. Texture refers to a pattern that visually explains how a surface might feel. In a realistic style of illustration, an artist would typically aim to render subject's texture to closely resemble what it looks like in real life. Sergio Toppi adds an element of design to his textures. Looking at this image, it's unmistakably a seal. But how about now? With the image partly covered, what other information do we have to explain the subject? Well, the source of light comes from the top right-hand corner. There's a shape and form, but yeah, it's unclear what it is. This lady. Awesome hair, right? Again, when I cover parts of the image, the texture alone doesn't reveal the entire story. What it does is build interest. From an art fundamentals point of view, all the key things are there: light and shadow, line quality, shape, dimension, and so on. Let's look at one more. The claws hint that it's a creature. Otherwise, your imagination can fill in the rest. You're probably thinking, Chloe, why would I want to study textures that don't actually explain how a surface might feel? You can't even tell what this is. Because look how delightful this image becomes when we unveil the full picture. Now the texture instantly becomes a point of interest. For this exercise, I'm using a blue pencil to make the guidelines on a deleter comic paper. That's what I have, but any materials will do. I'll be using a variety of inking tools throughout the video, but like I said, not to worry, the tools are less of a factor in this study. You'll benefit from the exercises using any of the materials that you have on hand. Let's practice by rendering small sections of his texture work. At first, I couldn't figure out the hatching logic on this bear, but then I did. It's not exactly a pattern, but it goes something like this. Thick to thin strokes going in one direction, then thin to thick in the same direction. Then he'll throw in a couple of much bolder lines or a gap, then he changes the stroke direction. For an added challenge, it's good to do a gradation scale. You'll have observed that Toppi's values are loosely intuitive compared to like a Bernie Wrightson or Gustave Doré, whose arrangements of values are precisely calculated. Alright, let's try this hair texture. I'm using a brush pen to simulate the effect. The strokes are an intertwined mix of very thick with very thin strokes. And similarly to the texture pattern on the bear, Toppi uses stroke angles to grade the tones. Once again, here I'm confirming that a standard scale that fades in tonal values is only somewhat informative to help us make shading decisions for Toppi's style. Toppi structures his compositions through the use of contrast, division of space, and silhouetting. The difference between the lightest value and the darkest value is known as the contrast. Space refers to the illusion of dimension and proportion created within a picture plane. A silhouetting technique is when the shape of a subject, an element, or part of its outline is represented as a solid, either all black or reversed to white. Toppi's use of silhouetting is cleverly coordinated as it provides structural balance in the picture plane. Typically, artists will aim to structure a composition through the use of well-balanced guidelines, such as the rule of thirds or the golden ratio. But Toppi uses the rule of third as a baseline, then more directly leads the viewer to a point of interest through the use of contrast, which divides the space with appealing symmetry, giving a sense of stability in the structure overall. Let's give composition a try. In this exercise, with an HB pencil, I'm sketching 3 thumbnails using Toppi's framework to structure different compositions. Pick a subject. At this stage, we're just arranging elements on the page, so the details aren't important yet. I'm drawing a feline warrior. The objective with these thumbnails is to figure out the division of space, what parts of the composition will be in black or silhouetted, which parts will be textured, and how the space is to be divided on the picture plane, following Master Toppi's methods. In this case, I'm copying his layouts for practice, and then just swapping the subjects with my characters. In the next step, we'll combine our textures exercise with the thumbnail ideas to create a final piece. For the final artwork, I penciled my drawing on a bristle vellum paper. The composition is based on thumbnail number 1, and I'm borrowing elements from each sketch. While drawing, I applied Master Toppi's tricks that give illusion of symmetry. I'm keeping the same spacing for the elements from the edges of the picture plane. You'll also note the sword is on a parallel plane to the edge of the vignette frame. Sketching from the poses of my British short-haired cat, I swapped the sword for a shooting flame effect, so she still looks menacing enough. For the ink application on the face, I'm using a Hunt 102 Crow Quill made by Speedball. For the cat's fur, I'm aiming for a similar pattern to what I already practiced for the texture of the bear. Master Toppi, he likely inked with a brush and perhaps a variety of instruments. Maybe he inked with a pen tool first, then did a second pass for the darker areas using a brush. By the way, if you've tried dip pens in the past and didn't get the results you were hoping for, there are links in the description to this blog article on how to match the right nib for your drawing style. I also created a dip pen course. You can watch the trailer and read the reviews. After I finished rendering the cat's arm, I went ahead and did the line work for the gown and the fire beam. Then I did a second pass using a thicker nib. I saved the brushwork for the finishing touches at the end. If this were a piece with a complex values arrangement, for example, something like in the style of Franklin Booth, as a sequence, I would ink from light to dark. However, the emphasis of Toppi's style is more on contrast and texture design than on tonal values. So you'll note that Toppi uses sparse cross-hatching, primarily for cast shadows. So I went ahead with a crow quill. Its finer nib helps keep the hatching effects subtle. I did not end up using the hair texture from our earlier practice. However, that exercise was valuable. It helped with loosening up my approach, which comes through in the final piece with a playful energy. And that concludes our study of Sergio Toppi's style. It felt like spending time with a mentor, teaching us how to render interesting texture and structure composition. I hope you got lots of fresh ideas. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate you give it a like. Follow for more, it helps support the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.